Okay, today we're going to I'm trying new equipment here, so we'll see how it works. But today we're going to try and get through two chapters, chapters 5 and 6. They're both short, and they're really a storytelling event, and so I think we need to just kind of get into today's study. Before we look at the Bible, as I read this, especially chapter 5, the combination between the end of chapter 4 and the beginning of chapter 5, it reminded me of a song that was popular in the early 70s. The United States, of course, at that time was taking part in the Vietnam War. This past Wednesday in the United States was what we call Veterans Day, and Veterans Day is a time to acknowledge and thank living veterans of whatever time period, whatever war or service they did. We also have a Memorial Day, which is when we remember the past military that have passed away. And there's also an Armed Forces Day where we recognize those who are in the military right now. But this week was Veterans Day. And I can remember back in the early 70s that there were a lot of people who didn't want us to be in that war. And there were some songs that were written to that effect. Some were very obvious, like, war, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing, okay? But there was another chorus that just sounded so cute and had a catchy tune, and it just kind of like, until you really paid attention to what it's saying, it just seems like a cute, fun song to sing along with. And it's called Billy, Don't Be a Hero. In the first verse, we find ourselves looking at a engaged couple, and he is about to leave to go to war. It doesn't mention which one, it's just going to war. And his fiance basically is telling him she's not really happy about this. And the chorus kind of repeats what's mainly in verse 1. The chorus goes, I'm not going to sing it. Billy, don't be a hero. Don't be a fool with your life. Billy, don't be a hero. Come back and make me your wife. And as he started to go, she said, Billy, keep your head low. Billy, don't be a hero. Come back to me. And that chorus is repeated. But verse 2 of the song, we find ourselves with Billy in the middle of a battle. And the commander comes and says, we need help. I need a volunteer to go and get us some help. And sure enough, Billy offers to be that person. Third verse, we're back to the fiance back in the States. And she receives a letter. And in the letter, it explains that it says that she should be proud because Billy died a hero. And the last line of the song of that verse is, I heard you threw the letter away. So this is talking about how, anti they were. Okay, why did that song come to mind? I think it's because of the idea of keep your head low, and Billy offering, saying, I'll be the one to go and get help. Somebody needs to go get help. I'll go get help. It reminded me a little, in a roundabout way, of the story. This part of the story of Esther. In chapter 4, she's reluctant, and basically, but by the end of it, she's like, okay, someone needs to go and get help for the Jewish people. And she decides that she will do it. And at the the very end of the chapter, in verse 16, is she basically says, you know, even though it's against the law, and I'll probably not make it, if I perish, I perish. If I die, I die. But somebody's got to go out and try and get some help, because in less than 11 months, all Jews will be killed. And so we need to do something about this. And so that's the end of chapter 4, and that's what reminded me of it. She has kept her head low up to this point. She hasn't told anyone she's Jewish. Mordecai told her not to, and she hasn't, and she's been quiet about it, but she's been keeping her head low. But now when somebody's got to go, even though it's a very dangerous mission, she's like, okay, I will do it. I will do it, and if I die, I die. If I perish, I perish. So that's where we find ourselves at the beginning of chapter 5. And again, 5 and 6 are going to be a lot of reading and a little bit of comment. So please join with me. Chapter 5, verses 1 and 2. Just right at the beginning, because we've left at kind of like this cliffhanger, what's going to happen. Everyone, all the Jews and Esther and her maids have been fasting for 3 days and nights, no food, no liquids, no water. And so now, on the 3rd day, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the palace, in front of the king's hall. The king was sitting in his royal throne in the hall, facing the entrance. When he saw Queen Esther standing in the court, he was pleased with her and held out to her the gold scepter that was in his hand. So Esther approached and touched the tip of the scepter. Sigh of relief. The only thing that would save her from death was him holding out that scepter and her being able to touch the tip. That's as close as she could come. And he was allowing her to come that close. Sigh of relief. Okay. He was pleased to see her. He hasn't seen her in over 33 days. But he hasn't called for her, he hasn't asked for her, he hasn't asked about her. 33 days, but he is pleased to see her. But it's more than that. Verses 3 through 8. Then the king asked, "What is it, Queen Esther? What is your request?" "Even up to half the kingdom, and it will be given you." Excuse me? Half of the kingdom? He's really happy. So her response to this incredible offer is, "If it pleases the king," replied Esther, "let the king, together with Haman, come today to a banquet I have prepared for him." "Bring Haman at once," the king said, "so that we may do what Esther asks." So the king and Haman went to the banquet Esther had prepared. As they were drinking wine, the king again asked Esther, "Now, what is your petition? It will be given you. And what is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, and it will be granted." Esther replied, "My petition and my request is this. If the king regards me with favor, and if it pleases the king to grant me my petition and fulfill my request, let the king and Haman come tomorrow to the banquet I will prepare for them. Then I will answer the king's questions." Okay, there's a few things in here. First of all, he's really in a good mood. He has offered her half his kingdom. And it's like, okay, what do you want? Up to half of your kingdom. It's like, it's yours. It's like, he is so pleased with Esther. Now, this is, like I've mentioned in other chapters, this king is a little on the narcissistic side. He's kind of like a party guy, and for him to do this is a little maybe supernatural. It's outside his normal character. It's surprising. Yeah. It's kind of like, maybe there's a divine touch going on here. Maybe it's a non-divine. It's supernatural. It could be that God is put her in favor, or it could be Satan tempting her to see if she'll just take that and leave. It's like that temptation, Jesus hadn't eaten for 40 days and Satan says, we'll change this rock into bread. He's kind of tempting him. It's like, well, I'll give you half of the kingdom. But no, she doesn't fall for it. She invites him and Haman to a banquet that she's going to give them. No. Sorry, my dog is begging. Anyway, so she invites them, and it's like right away they go, he calls for Haman. Again, only people who are called by the king can come into his presence. And apparently Haman isn't there at the moment. So he calls to have Haman brought, and they go to Esther's for this banquet. Now, this is like, okay, click, 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 click. How much time was there in between her request and they're going to this banquet? It doesn't say that it was several hours later. If it happened to be immediately, that means that Esther had to have a banquet already preparing for them before she went. And there's a couple points there. First of all, there's this trust, showing trust that God is with her. And two, they haven't eaten in 3 days, and they're preparing food without eating it. That's commitment. That is really sticking to that fast. Kind of interesting, those when I read, questions come up, and this is good. When you read the Bible, let the questions come up, things that kind of catch your eye and make you think. Curious. What was it? Was it God fixing the way for her, or was it Satan trying to tempt her one last time? Were they fixing food while they were still fasting to make sure that everything was perfect? After 3 days of not eating and drinking, the energy to spend fixing up a banquet for a king and his second in command? Yeah, these different questions. And then, of course, the king's like, okay, what is it that you really want? And he repeats again, up to half of my kingdom. And she's like, well, could you come back tomorrow night, the two of you, for a banquet I'll have for you then? And then I will tell you what it is that I will answer your questions. It's like, really? You're going to go another day? It was like, why not just tell him now? For some reason, God's timing kind of shows up now. God's timing just stops things, and she has obviously God's wisdom in that statement. And we're going to find out why as we continue reading chapters 5 and 6. Okay, so let's continue. See now, okay. Tomorrow night, we're coming back for another banquet with the queen. Keep in mind, very few men are ever in the queen's rooms, the queen's part of the palace. Only eunuchs are allowed in there, and the king. So this is a great honor that the king is allowing Haman to come with him into his harem, basically, to the rooms or palace, whatever portion of the palace that belongs to the queen, that the queen lives in, resides in, and so to be offered this again, Haman is really like, I have arrived. Man, have I arrived. So we continue now. Verse 9. Haman went out that day happy and in high spirits. But when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home. Calling together his friends and Zeresh, his wife, Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, and all the ways the king had honored him, and how he had elevated him above the other nobles and officials. Brag, brag, brag. And that's not all, Haman added. I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave, and she has invited me along with the king tomorrow. And but all this gives me no satisfaction as long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate. His wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, have a gallows built, or it's actually an impaling rod, a pole to impale. It's the same word. It's how they actually, the word is hung. People are hung. Well, we think of hanging by the neck with a rope, but their bodies were hung, impaled on a tall spike. Anyway, so have a gallows built 75 feet high, and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai hanged on it. Then go with the king to the dinner and be happy. This suggestion delighted Haman, and he had the gallows built. Okay, so his wife and friends say, don't let this guy bring you down. Build it 75 feet high. I mean, that's like almost 7 stories high, at least 6 stories high. This is like going to be seen from around the city. It's so tall that they will see what you have done to Mordecai. And of course, the king doesn't care about Mordecai. He's just a commoner. You ask permission and he'll be sure to grant it to you. So they go ahead with this plan. Now, here comes God again in this story. Perfect timing. Chapter 6, verses 1 through 3. That night, the king could not sleep, so he ordered the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded there that Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, 2 of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this? The king asked. Nothing has been done for him, his attendants answered. So here it is, the night between these 2 banquets. Perfect timing. Let's wait. Haman is ready to have Mordecai impaled, hung. But in the middle of the night, the king is restless. He can't sleep. And how is it, miraculous maybe, that the exact story written down in the Chronicles of the Empire is the one about Mordecai, by name, having saved the king from the assassination attempt. Incredible timing, supernatural timing. God is present in this moment. We continue, verses 4 through 9. You're going to love this one. The king said, "Who's in the court?" Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the palace to speak to the king about hanging Mordecai on the gallows he had erected for him. His attendants answered, "Well, Haman is standing in the court." "Bring him in," the king ordered. When Haman entered, the king asked him, "What should be done for the man the king delights to honor?" Now Haman, narcissist that he is, thought to himself, "Who is there that the king would rather honor than me?" So he answered the king, "For the man the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head. Then let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, 'This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor.'" Haman is like, "Oh man, I'm going to be wearing one of the king's robes, sitting on one of the king's horses, having one of these princes go around telling the whole city about how the king is delighted in me. Wow, this is incredible." No. Verse 10 and 11. "Go at once," the king commanded Haman. "Get the robe and the horse and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai, the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect anything you have recommended." So Haman got the robe and the horse. He robed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." Yeah. Instead of impaling Mordecai, he is now proclaiming him as this honored one of the king. No impaling going to happen now. Not today, at least. Not for a long time. So then we go to the rest of this chapter. Afterward, Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home with his head covered in grief and told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had happened to him. Yeah, everything that happened to him. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, Since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin." While they were still talking with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther had prepared. So finally, his wife is saying, "You know what? Obviously, Mordecai's God, the Jewish God, is on his side and against you, and it's obvious that this is going to lead to your ruin. I'm sorry, but this is not good. This is not something you want." And then he's in this same mood, in this dark mood. He's taken off by eunuchs to go to the banquet that Esther has prepared. And that's in chapter 7. So we're going to leave it there. Perfect timing. I knew that these two chapters would be really easy to go. But look at the turn of events. You have Esther saying, "If I die, I die. I will be that hero. I will try and be that hero. I will try and help my people." And then whether it's God or Satan, maybe God put the king in a good mood. Satan brought the idea of temptation. Who knows? But she didn't fall for the temptation. She held her ground. And then rather than tell the king right then and there's got to have been something of God holding her back and just giving her, it's like, wait until tomorrow. Let's do this again tomorrow. Give me a chance to do some work here. And then, of course, Haman absolutely hating Mordecai so much that all this splendor and joy that he should be feeling about being invited by the queen with the king to a banquet for 2 days in a row, he so hates Mordecai that he cannot enjoy what has happened, the good that has happened. Cannot let hate drown out everything. We need to trust God. We need to be willing to go with his timing. We need to listen to his lead. We cannot fall into temptation. We cannot allow ourselves, and Satan knows how to tempt us. We can't fall into that. And we can't allow hate to overtake us. What else is there? Don't worry about being rewarded at the moment. God knows. And even though Mordecai was never acknowledged for having saved the king's life at that time, it didn't embitter him. Just went with the flow. It's okay. We just keep going. So trusting God, not looking for our own glorification, but in God's time, he used it. If Mordecai had been recognized back then, what would have happened now? He might have ended up impaled. So all of this is like, wow. And then the wife realization saying, you know what? His God is on his side, and that means nothing good. That is not good. So that's where we end. That's where we stop for this week. And keep those little lessons in mind. Trust God, even if it means danger. Be that hero. Don't allow yourself to be tempted into doing something that wouldn't have been a sin to take half of the kingdom, but it wasn't what God had in mind for her. So it would have been a sin because she would have stepped away from what God wanted her to do. It doesn't seem like a sin. It seems like a good idea. Don't let yourself be deviated by a temptation from God's path. And don't let hate eat you up from inside, because there is joy to be found despite circumstances. And I'm going over all these in my mind. And you know what? Don't worry about being rewarded at the time, even if it's in heaven. You will be acknowledged. What you have done will be acknowledged by God, the King of Kings, at some point. And putting it off might even save your life. Why not? You never know. It might move your life in a different direction than you thought. And so we stop there. I'll see you next time, and I'm going to try this little gadget and see if it'll actually turn this off. Bye.